11 years on the same floor. 11 years, clocking in at 10:50 at night and walking back out at 7 the next morning. 5 nights a week, sometimes 6, when somebody called out and the supervisor asked in a voice that already knew the answer. She did not need a clock to know it was 1:40 in the morning. The body learns a night the way it learns a stairwell. It learns the weight of a loaded cart on a waxed floor. It learns which of the 4 wheels will start squeaking after the second hallway, and how far the handle has to lean before the squeak stops. Room 412 was the 11th stop. Always the 11th. The order had stopped being a decision somewhere around year 4. The cart came through the doorway slowly. Inside, the woman in the bed was asleep with her mouth open and the blanket pulled up to her chin. The overhead light stayed off. There was a small lamp above the sink that threw just enough yellow to work by, and in rooms where somebody was sleeping, that lamp was the only one that ever came on. A cloth came out of the side bucket. Wrung twice. The smell of the solution was sharp and clean and had stopped registering years ago, except in the first 10 seconds of a shift. The windowsill got wiped. Then it got wiped again. There was nothing left on it the second time. Nothing at all. The cloth moved through the same line it had already moved through, slower now, from the left corner to the right, and then back again. The water pitcher on the tray table got straightened 2 inches to the left. A hand tilted it slightly and checked that it was full. Outside the window, 4 floors down, a delivery truck was backing into the loading dock with its reverse alarm going. The sound came through the glass thin and far away. It went on for a while and then stopped, and the silence afterward had a shape to it. The cart went back out into the hallway. The door swung closed behind it and made no sound at all. That hinge had been dry for a year before somebody brought in a small can of oil from home and fixed it on an unpaid Tuesday in March, standing on a step stool at 4 in the morning, and told nobody about it afterward. The cart moved on to room 414. Stay with me. What she carries in the chest pocket of that uniform is the reason any of this matters. Her name was Marisol Bautista, 54 years old. Environmental services, night shift, 4th floor, at a hospital 11 minutes from the 3rd-story walk-up she rented near Journal Square in Jersey City. $18.20 an hour. She had gotten a raise in February that came out to 40 cents. She had noticed it on the check and had not mentioned it to anyone. The apartment had a radiator that knocked twice before it came on. In winter, she slept from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon with a towel rolled against the bottom of the door, because the hallway light came through, and the hallway light was the thing that woke her, not the noise. She ate her main meal at 9 at night, standing at the counter, before she left. Rice and whatever had been made on Sunday. She did not eat at the hospital. 11 years, and she had never once bought anything from the machines on 3. The bus came at 9:40. She was at the stop by 9:35. She clocked in at 10:50, 10 minutes early, every working night for 11 years. First, she checked the cart. She loaded it herself, in the same order every time, because a cart loaded in the same order can be worked in the dark. Solution on the left. Cloths folded in 4ths in the top bin, 12 of them, always 12. Liners. Gloves. The mop head she preferred, which was not the one the day shift used. Then she checked the log. The sign-in binder sat at the end of the nurse's station, in a black cover with the corner worn through to the cardboard. Visitors printed their names, the room number, the time in, the time out. By 11 at night, the day was closed, and the page was final. Marisol read that page the way other people read weather. It told her nothing about why. It only told her how long. The notebook started in her 3rd year. Not as a plan. She had begun forgetting which rooms had gone how many days, and the forgetting bothered her more than the work ever had. It was small and spiral-bound, the kind sold 3 for $1 at the pharmacy on Sip Avenue. The cover had gone soft at the corners and furred along the edge where it rubbed against the inside of her pocket. A rubber band held it shut, the same rubber band for years now. It had come off a bunch of broccoli that cost 99 cents at the corner store. On some Tuesday she could no longer place. She had looped it around the notebook without thinking about it and had never once thought about replacing it. Inside, there were no names. She had decided that in the first week and never broke it. Just room numbers, and beside each one, a count. 326, 6, 4, 0, 8, 2, 412, climbing. A name in the log reset the count to 0. No name meant the number went up by 1. That was the whole system. It had taken her about 4 minutes to invent and 11 years to run. Not every number kept climbing. Near the top of page 6, in ink gone almost gray, one line read 211 and beside it 11. It was crossed out with a single stroke. Beneath it, she had written a date from 6 years back and nothing else. She remembered that one. A daughter had come from Arizona. Marisol passed her in the corridor at 7 in the morning, going off shift, and the daughter was asleep in the vinyl chair with her coat still on and her purse in her lap. Marisol said nothing to her. Not then, not ever. She simply stopped needing the extra 4 minutes in that room and moved them somewhere else. Because that was the arithmetic, and the arithmetic was the point. Room 408 belonged to a man named Anthony Pell that autumn. His wife Doreen signed in at 2 in the afternoon every single day, in blue ink, in handwriting that leaned hard to the right, and she always wrote her time out as a rounded number, even when it was not 1, 5:30, 6 o'clock, never 5:42. Marisol had never met Doreen Pell and never would. She knew her by her handwriting the way you know a neighbor by their car. Room 408 got 4 minutes flat. Sill, rail, floor, liner, out. That room did not need her, and she did not pretend otherwise. That was where the minutes came from. Room 326 was the harder kind. A son signed in there, but not every day. Sometimes 4 days in a row and then nothing for a week and a half. Marisol had never worked out the pattern, and she had tried. She kept the count going anyway, resetting it every time his name came back, and the number beside 326 had been as high as 9 and as low as 0 twice in the same month. She gave that room 3 extra minutes on a blank day and none at all on a signed one. It was the only room on the floor where she had to decide fresh every night. In rooms where a name had been signed in that day, she worked fast. 4 minutes saved here, 3 there. She banked them the way other people bank money, in small amounts, with a running total she carried in her head and never wrote down. In rooms where the page was blank, she spent what she had saved. She stayed. She wiped a sill that did not need it. A chair got moved 6 inches and moved back. A pitcher that was already 3/4 full got emptied and refilled, and she stood there while the water ran, and the water took about 40 seconds. There was a 15-minute break at 3 in the morning that she was entitled to. She took it about twice a month. Her supervisor was a man named Ray Delacroix, who ran 3 floors and printed his reports on Monday mornings before he went home. 3 times over 3 quarters, he had come to find her at the end of a shift, in the corridor by the service elevator, with a printed sheet folded once in his hand. The first time he asked whether the cart was slowing her down and whether she wanted a different one. The second time, he said the number was still coming up on the report, and that he had to write it down when it did. The third time, he did not say much of anything. He held the sheet out, and she took it and folded it again the same way and put it in her pocket. "Okay," she said. All 3 times. The same word. The same tone. No explanation attached to it. Ray was not unkind about any of it. He had a report that printed on Monday and a column that turned a number red, and the number in that column had her employee number next to it. She never once told him why the number was what it was. She threw all 3 sheets away in the bin by the bus stop on Baldwin, on 3 different mornings, and she did not slow down, and she did not speed up. She did not think of any of this as generosity. She thought of it as arithmetic. There was one other person in that building who seemed to understand what Marisol was doing, and that person never once said so out loud. Mai Tran had been charge nurse on the day shift for 9 of Marisol's 11 years. Somewhere around year 4, without a conversation, Mai started leaving the sign-in binder on top of Marisol's cart before the day shift ended. Folded open. Always to the right page. That saved 4 minutes at the start of every shift. Once, in a week when Marisol's pen had gone dry on a Wednesday and she had finished the entry in pencil, there was a new pen on top of the binder on Thursday. Blue, cheap, the kind that comes 10 to a box. No note with it. Neither woman ever brought any of it up. Not once in 7 years. It was simply how the cart looked when Marisol came around the corner at 10:50. The same way the fourth wheel always squeaked. The same way that hallway at that hour always smelled faintly of the lavender solution the day crew used on their last pass. Her mother had done something like this once, in a house in Cavite, which is pronounced Cavite, on a street where the pavement gave out about halfway down. The neighbor was an old man whose children had gone to America and had not managed to come back in time. Marisol was 9. She remembered sitting on the floor of that room with her back against the wall while her mother changed the water in a glass on the nightstand, wiped down a windowsill that did not need it, and stayed longer than anything in that room required her to stay. Her mother said something under her breath that afternoon. Hi Nah-ku. 2 words. Soft. Not directed at Marisol. And not directed at the man in the bed. Directed at the room itself, if anywhere. Nobody explained what it meant, and Marisol did not ask. What she remembered was that her mother went back the next day, and the day after that, and that when the man died in November, her mother wore her good shoes to the house and did not cry in front of anybody. Marisol had 2 years of nursing school in Manila before the family came over. The credential did not carry. There was a bridge program at a college in Newark, and in March of 2013 a letter came from that program with a figure on it, $14,600 for the year. She read it at her kitchen table with her coat still on and the radiator knocking behind her. Then she folded it in thirds and put it in the drawer under the phone book. That same week, she started sending money to her sister in Cavite instead. Her sister had 2 boys. The younger one was Bayani, which is pronounced Bayani. He was 12 now. Once, years ago, Marisol asked him on the phone whether his shoes still fit. Ever since then, he had sent her a photograph of his shoes every few months. No message with it, just the shoes, on a tile floor, taken from above, always slightly crooked in the frame. The most recent one had come in September. White, scuffed at the toe, laces tied in a knot rather than a bow. She had looked at it on the bus and then put the phone back in her bag. She had never told anyone at the hospital about the notebook. Nobody had ever asked what was in her chest pocket besides a pen. Before she went into any room at all, she tapped the doorframe twice with 1 knuckle. She had done that for as long as she had done anything. She could not have said why, and nobody had ever asked her to. She finished her rounds at 6:40 that morning, punched out at 7, walked down the ramp to the bus stop on Baldwin without looking back at the building. The bus home was mostly people going the other direction, in the other kind of clothes, holding coffee. She sat on the left side because the sun came up on the right and she had 8 hours of sleep to protect. 2 stops before hers, a man got on with a toolbox and set it on the floor between his feet, and the sound it made was the sound a full toolbox makes. She was home by 7:35. She ate a boiled egg standing at the counter, rolled the towel against the bottom of the door, and was asleep by 8:10. The woman in room 412 was Eleanor Voss, 88 years old, admitted on a Thursday in early October. There was a cardigan hanging on the back of the chair by the window that had not been moved in 2 weeks. On the tray table, there was a phone with its charger coiled neatly beside it, never plugged in. By the 12th night, the count beside 412 read 12. By the 14th, 14. Marisol wrote the entries in the stairwell between the 4th floor and the 3rd. At the end of every shift, standing up, using the flat of the handrail as a desk. It took less than a minute. The stairwell had a window at the landing that faced east, and by 6:40 in October the sky in that window had started to go gray at the bottom. On the 15th night, Eleanor Voss spoke to her. "You always do that twice," she said. Her voice was thin. It was also completely steady, which was the part Marisol noticed. Marisol did not stop wiping. Habit, she said. Eleanor did not ask which habit. She closed her eyes again. Marisol finished the sill, straightened the pitcher, checked the level, and went on to 4:14. Nothing changed in the notebook that night. The number went up by 1, the way it did. 4 nights later, Eleanor was awake again when the cart came in. She was lying on her side facing the window, which was black, with the room reflected in it. "What time is it?" she said. Not really as a question. 1:40. "There's a truck." "Most nights," Marisol said. "It comes at 1:40. Eleanor thought about that for a moment. "Good," she said, and turned her face back toward the window. Marisol wiped the sill twice, straightened the pitcher, and went out. In the stairwell at 6:40, she wrote 19 beside 412 and closed the notebook and put the band around it. My tran came on at 7 that morning, the way she did. The 2 women passed each other in the corridor outside 410, one going off and one coming on, and Mai said good morning, and Marisol said good morning. Mai went to the station and opened the binder to the day's page. Room 412 had a blank line under it, going back 3 weeks, and she could see all of it at once from where she stood. She did not write anything in the notes. There is no field in a chart for that. What she did was walk down at 7:10 and open the blinds in 412 halfway, which is not a nursing task and takes about 4 seconds, and then she went back and started her rounds. Daniel Reyes had been director of operations for that hospital system for 6 years. 49 years old. An office on the 2nd floor with a window facing the parking structure and a door he kept open, which everyone had learned did not mean what an open door usually means. He read a building the way Marisol read a hallway. Occupancy, turnover times, bed to discharge intervals, supply variance, housekeeping variance, sorted by shift, sorted by floor, sorted by minutes over standard. Floor 4 had appeared on the housekeeping variance report 3 quarters running, 1 employee number, over and over. In the column, marked exceeds standard time on assigned rounds. He had signed the coaching memo 3 times. Standard language, documentation only, no action recommended. Each time, he read the subject line, saw the floor number, initialed the 2nd page, and moved to the next item in the queue. The detail sheet was attached to all 3. He had never opened it. This was not laziness. It was a system, and the system had been built for a reason that had nothing to do with housekeeping. He was good at the job. That part was not in question anywhere in the building. In his 6 years, the average time to turn a bed on 4 had come down by 19 minutes, and the linen contract had been rebid twice, and the loading dock schedule had been moved to 1:40 in the morning, because that was the hour with the least traffic in the ambulance bay. He had made that change himself, in his 2nd year, on a spreadsheet, in about 40 minutes. He had never been on the 4th floor at 1:40 in the morning to hear it. Daniel's father was Walter Reyes, machine shop foreman in Dayton, Ohio. 31 years at the same shop, which closed in 1998. Walter kept his employee badge in his wallet behind his license for the 11 years after that. It opened no door anywhere on earth. He carried it anyway, and if anyone had asked him about it, he would have said he had not gotten around to taking it out. He was a man who believed there was a correct way to do small things, and that the correct way took the same amount of time as the incorrect way. He taught his son to coil a garden hose in loops that lay flat. He taught him to put a tool back where it came from before picking up the next one. Walter died on the 4th floor of a hospital outside Dayton 9 years ago, on a Wednesday night, at some hour nobody wrote down for Daniel because Daniel did not ask. Daniel was in a conference room in Chicago that night, closing an acquisition he had insisted on handling personally, rather than passing to a deputy who was fully capable of handling it. He flew out the next morning on the 6:20. By the time he reached the floor, the room had been turned over. The bed was made. There was a folded blanket at the foot of it. The rails were down, and the tray table had been pushed flat against the wall. A nurse he did not recognize handed him a manila envelope with his father's watch in it, and his father's reading glasses, and the badge out of the wallet. He never asked anybody whether there had been anyone in that room during the night. Not that morning, and not in the 9 years after. What he built instead was a principle he could say out loud in a meeting without anyone objecting to it. A system does not need a witness. It needs to function. Grief is not a line item. If you cannot measure something, you cannot manage it, and if you cannot manage it, it will manage you. That principle was elegant. It was load-bearing, and it was the reason he had signed 3 coaching memos without reading past the subject line. The locker inventory happened because of a theft. $220 in cash went missing out of a coat pocket in the 3rd-floor break room on a Sunday. Policy required a full sweep of employee lockers on any floor where a theft had been reported inside of 30 days. Daniel usually let the head of security run a sweep like that. The head of security was out that week with the flu. His deputy offered to handle it. Daniel said he would do it himself. He said it the way he always said it, pleasantly, without leaving any room in the sentence, and the deputy went back downstairs. He started on 4 at 6 in the evening, before the night shift came in, with a clipboard and a member of security beside him holding the master key. Most lockers hold what lockers hold: a spare uniform on a wire hanger, a phone charger with the cord wound around itself, half a bag of pretzels rolled shut with the top folded twice, a pair of work shoes with the heels gone soft on the outside edges, a paperback with the cover bent all the way back, a photograph taped inside a door, curling at 2 corners. He looked at each one. He marked the form. He moved on. It took an hour and 10 minutes, and nobody said anything except the security officer, once, about the weather. Locker 14 belonged to M. Bautista, Environmental Services, Floor 4, night shift. Inside, there was a spare uniform on a wire hanger, a folded umbrella, a small tin of hard candy with maybe half of them left, and a spiral notebook held shut with a rubber band. He almost left it. Nothing about it required his attention. It was not cash, and it was not hospital property, and the form asked him only to confirm the contents were personal and release them back to the employee. The security officer beside him had already looked away and was checking his phone against the wall. Daniel stood there with the notebook in his hand and turned it over once. The band had been on it long enough to leave a dent across the cover, front and back, a shallow groove where it always sat. A ledger, he thought. Somebody keeping a second set of hours. That happens. Overtime written down at home because a payroll system had shorted somebody once and they had never trusted it again since. He had seen 2 of those in 6 years, and both times the employee had been right. So he had a reason to open it that he could have written on the form. He opened it anyway, and that was not the reason. He had never in his life handed a document to someone else to read for him, and the reason for that went back further than the hospital did. The pages were dense. Dates down the left side, going back years. The ink changed color a dozen times, blue to black to blue again, and once a stretch of maybe 40 entries in pencil. The handwriting never changed at all. It pressed hard enough to raise the reverse of every sheet. No names anywhere. Not one. In 11 years of pages, just room numbers, and beside each one, a number that only went in a single direction. He turned back to the front. The earliest entries were faded almost to nothing, and the paper had gone the color of weak tea. Most counts stopped somewhere in the 20s or the 30s. Some were crossed out with a single stroke. A few ran into 3 digits, and one of those had a small mark beside it that he could not interpret and never would. Then he turned to the last page with writing on it. 326, 6, 408, 2, 412, 19. He looked at the number 19 longer than he meant to. Someone had counted those nights on purpose, in pen. Every one of them, alone, in a stairwell, at the end of a shift. He thought of a water pitcher on a tray table in Dayton, full to the line, still full when he got there at 9 the next morning. He had never once asked how long it had been full. He closed the notebook. He put the rubber band back around it, and he did not put it back the way it had been. He noticed that after he had already done it, and he did not fix it. The next morning, he opened the housekeeping software at his desk and pulled the file attached to that employee number. 3 coaching memos, each one with his own signature on the second page. each one recommending the standard reminder regarding time management on assigned rounds. He added a note to the file and closed the flag. Variance approved. No further action required. He did not explain the note to anyone, and nobody asked him to. That is the useful thing about a system. Nobody asks a system why. At 10:30 that same morning, the deputy came up about the theft file. The sweep had turned up nothing. There was no camera in that corridor, and there never had been, because the corridor did not go anywhere that required one. The $220 was gone, and was going to stay gone. Daniel signed the file closed and put it in the outgoing tray. It was the third theft in that break room in 2 years. He knew that, because he had signed the other 2 closed as well. The notebook stayed in his desk drawer for 2 days. He told himself this was procedural. Personal property removed during a sweep required a documented chain of custody before release, which was true, and which had nothing whatever to do with why it was still in the drawer on the second afternoon. On the second night, he went up to 4 at 11:15. He did not have a reason that would have survived being said out loud. He had stayed late. He had gone to the second-floor kitchen for water. Then he took the stairs, and the stairs go up as easily as they go down. He stood at the far end of the corridor by the fire door, where the light from the nurse's station does not quite reach. A cart came out of one room and went into the next, then the one after that. He watched it, and he checked his watch when it went into the third room, which was 15 minutes in. A nurse came past him with a laptop cart and said, "Good evening." He said, "Good evening" back. She kept going. He looked at his watch again. 9 minutes had gone by, and the cart was still in that room. He went back down by the stairs. The elevator on that floor opens facing the station, and he took the stairs. On the third morning, he had security let him into the break room at 6, before the day shift came in. The room smelled like burned coffee. The refrigerator was running loud, the way it had been running loud for at least a year. He put the notebook back in locker 14, on the shelf, next to the tin of candy. He wound the rubber band around it in a double loop and tucked the end under. That was the way his father coiled a hose in the driveway on Fernwood Avenue, and it was the way Daniel had wound every band and every cord since he was 9 years old. It was not the way the band had been on it when he found it. He had no way of knowing what her knot looked like. He did not ask anyone, and there was nobody to ask. He closed the locker. He left no note. Nothing in that locker would ever tell her that anyone had opened it, except the band, and he had already worked out that he could not fix the band without making it worse. He walked back down the hallway toward the stairs. On the way out, he passed the housekeeping status board by the service elevator. 120 names behind a plastic sleeve, printed small. He had walked past that board twice a day for 6 years. He did not stop this time either. 3 nights later, room 412 was empty and turned over. The bed was made. The blanket was folded at the foot of it. The cardigan was gone from the back of the chair, and the tray table had been pushed flat against the wall. Marisol stood in the doorway with her hand on the cart handle. She did not know which of the 2 things had happened, and there was nobody at the station at that hour she would have asked. She cleaned the room the way the room needed to be cleaned. 11 minutes. Standard. 408 took 4 minutes that night, the way it always did. Doreen Pell had signed in at 2 in the afternoon and out at 5:30, in blue ink, leaning hard to the right. In the stairwell at 6:40, Marisol opened the notebook and looked at the line for 412 for a while. The window at the landing had gone gray at the bottom. Then, she closed the notebook without writing anything, and she left the number where it was. The following Monday, she came in at 10:50, the way she always did. The break room was empty. The refrigerator was running loud. There was a photocopied notice taped to the wall beside the door that had not been there before. 3 lines. Employee lockers on floors 3 and 4 had been inspected in accordance with policy following a reported theft. Contents had been returned. Questions to Human Resources. She read it once, standing there with her bag still on her shoulder, and then she went to her locker. She opened 14 and reached for the notebook, and her hand knew before her eyes did. The rubber band sat higher on the cover than she kept it. Doubled over. Pulled tight, with the end tucked under. She stood there holding it. Down the hall, somebody rolled a linen cart across the tile, and the wheels went over the seam by the elevator with a sound like a knuckle on a door. She slid the band off. She wound it back on the way she had wound it for years. One loop. Loose enough that it would come off with one hand in a dark room, without her having to put anything down first. Then she put the notebook in her chest pocket, checked the cart, and walked out toward the nurse's station to read the log before her shift started.